Hi, Clutter Fairy fans. Welcome to the Clutter Fairy Weekly for January 5th, 2021. I'm your co-host, Ed Gumnick, because I got COVID haircut number 3, and so I'm now reasonably presentable. I am speaking with Gayle Goddard, professional organizer and owner of the Clutter Fairy in Houston, Texas.
Hi, everybody. I'm just laughing about Ed talking about his COVID haircut. Oh my gosh. Okay, so the Clutter Fairy Weekly is our weekly webcast and podcast where we talk about all things organized, and this is our first episode. Thank you, everybody, for joining us again, and we appreciate you're here. And we're going to talk about stuff that has come up from all of your conversations in our social media channels. So we appreciate that you go in there because we're about to use one of those exact chats.
Yes, we are. And if you are joining us in the Zoom meeting for the first time, you can share your comments and questions via the chat, and I'll try to make sure Gayle gets them before we move on. You can also use the raise hand feature if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment yourself, and we'll enable your microphone and or video so you can be part of the presentation. We're also streaming the webcast live on Facebook, so you can share your questions and comments there, and I'll relay them to Gayle. And during the webcast every Tuesday, you can talk to us by calling 669-900-6833. Use meeting ID 993-419-863 and password clutter to join the meeting. Okay, let's get to our topic. It's a new year and a new season of the Clutter Fairy Weekly. Welcome to season 2. With today's episode, we're launching a new recurring segment. We're going to do that at the end, so be sure you stay with us till the end when we'll announce what we're provisionally calling the homework assignment. And we're also going to announce a contest to get you to help us come up with a better name.
Because y'all are also creative.
Right. So every week during our live sessions, we have some very lively discussions in the chat. And sometimes the comments start flying fast and furious, and it's easy to miss something. So a lot of participants have expressed interest in getting access to transcripts after the meeting to catch up on anything that they might have missed. We're happy to accommodate that request, and so we've included chat transcripts in the show notes for our last few episodes. And those show notes go up usually at the same time that we publish the podcast and the YouTube video. As I've been preparing the transcripts for posting, though, I've been stripping out participant last names to protect everybody's privacy, and it would save me some work if I didn't have to do that. So I just sort of wanted to announce that if you're okay with having your last name as part of the chat transcript, then you can leave it that way. If you don't want your last name to appear in the transcript, then please change your screen name in Zoom. If you don't want your first name to appear either, you can feel free to anonymize yourself with a clever nickname. So, okay, enough announcements. Speaking of chat, we've been reviewing chat transcripts to dig up topics that we didn't have time to cover adequately in previous episodes. And the conversation from one of our recent episodes inspired today's topic, which is child's play and adult joy. Organizing your recipes.
We thought we'd cover this topic in greater detail because aside from the instructions to organize your recipes, it's really a very big, fine sorting project with many steps to get organized. And so we'll cover the many fine sorting steps today. I've seen a ton of recipe piles over the course of my work, and sometimes there's even an inherited recipe pile in addition to the original pile. Decades of recipe clippings inside a box or a cookbook or multiple recipe boxes is a big mess, and no one can cook out of that chaos. It's time to step our way through getting the recipes filtered, sorted, and usable to inspire your cooking at home. One presumes it's January and you're going to, everybody always is going to get healthy at the beginning of the year. And so we often turn back to cooking when we've been blowing it off because we've been busy for the holidays. So in honor of your refocus of your cooking, here we go. So the first step to doing this process is to filter the recipes. And you want to do that with a keep toss exercise. So it's a big task in and of itself, and you're going to need some filter algorithms to help you get here. And Ed has offered some of his favorite ones to help you out. And we also pulled some suggestions from the chat that was about recipes. And so the goal here is to find the recipes that you've already tried and approved, and find the recipes that you still want to try. Like, that's the end population you want to get to. And you need to filter the ones that don't qualify as those two. So here's some steps to get you there. This was an Ed one. If you look at a recipe and there are 4 ingredients that you have to go buy, and especially if you won't use those 4 ingredients for anything else, then that recipe is a no. Why did you add that one in, Ed? Talk to me about that a little bit.
Well, and the number 4 was sort of arbitrary, but
right.
If you're going to have to make a huge investment, and especially if this recipe has been lingering for a long time, because every time you look at it, you say,
oh, well, I have to go buy those 4 things.
Yeah, I'm going to need shiitake mushrooms, and I'm going to need some
Asian spice.
Some garlic chili paste, and I don't use those regularly. They're not part of my routine. And for me, that number is probably 3 or 4. If I'm going to have to go buy 3 or 4 things for this recipe, and then I'm not likely to use them again, that's kind of the cutoff.
And in terms of financial investment, that's also it's a lot of money to spend for a recipe that you're going to try, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
And so if you can filter that out and go, okay, this is too much monetary outlay for an experiment that I want to do, and my threshold is 3 ingredients, 4 ingredients, $50, whatever you want to call your threshold. Use it as a way to say, okay, that recipe reads fun, but it's going to cost me too much, or it's going to give me too many ingredients that I don't want to have to go get. And so put it in the no pile. Then it goes in the recycle pile. Okay, here's algorithm number 2. If there are ingredients in the recipe that one person in the house doesn't like, then that recipe is pretty much a no. I mean, if everybody in the house hates mushrooms, then recipes that have mushrooms in them are probably not good recipes to keep. But it can be something more obscure than that. Like, if it has a chili pepper in it and my husband hates chili peppers, then I really don't want to try this recipe, because I'm pretty sure chili peppers are a standout ingredient in the recipe, right? And so if you've clipped things that sounded like fun, and then you look at the recipe list and you realize there's something on there that will annoy, make someone in your household refuse, make someone in your house sick, people have bad reactions to stuff. You have to filter for, I would love to make this bread, but it has XYZ in it that somebody can't eat, or won't eat, or will refuse to eat, or will pitch a fit about eating. And if any of those things are true, then this recipe should probably be a no. This is another Ed filtered one. It says if the recipe has more than 10 ingredients, Ed says no, it's too complicated. It's too complicated to do. I'm losing interest after 10 ingredients. And the corollary also is if the recipe is beyond your skill set, or beyond the time that you have to spend, or more importantly, the time that you want to spend. If the recipe is going to take 3 days and that's not your thing, then you probably need to go, that reads like a lot of fun, but I'm not spending 3 days doing nothing, and out it goes. So it's just a way to decide at what point is it more than you want to deal with.
Well, and again, 10 is just a number off the top of my head, but it's more a matter of, if you're an experienced cook, you can look at a recipe and determine this is going to be very complicated. And sometimes they say 40 minutes preparation time, and better. You can read it and know that's going to
call BS.
Yeah, I'm going to have to wash things. I'm going to have to peel things. I'm going to have to chop things, and I know it's going to take longer than this. And so it's your own threshold.
Mm-hmm.
If you're sort of a weekend cook and you have a few skills, but you don't know how to make a souffle work, you don't know how to fold an omelet, then don't hang on to recipes that are beyond where you are, is kind of the point there. Our dear friend Julie, who's a very talented cook, she and I would save a few of those, 17 ingredient recipes with 23 preparation steps for weekend days when we plan to get together and cook
all day.
The two of us, and then sometimes Gayle as our scullery maid.
I'm the official scullery maid / taste tester. They don't let me do anything else. Oh my gosh.
That's not true. I think we've let you wash lettuce, haven't we?
Yeah, you might have let me touch some of the ingredients physically. It's true. Well, so maybe you're not a super skilled cook, or you only do it on the weekends because that's when you have time. And my brother-in-law, for instance, really is a very experienced cook, and he loves to do it, but he doesn't do it very much during the week. But at the holidays, for instance, like, we all benefit from his big experiment. So a couple of times a year, he gets out the serious Alton Brown recipe on how to make a standing rib roast, or how to, he will experiment with some big piece of meat and serve it at one of our meals. And so that for him is entertainment. He likes it. It takes a long time for him to do the work, but he finds that fun in the holidays. So if you have certain times of the year when you have time to do a 47-step 2-day process, good for you. And recognize that, he does it 2 times a year, 3 times a year, when he has some big chunk of time off and he wants to experiment. And the rest of the time, he doesn't have time for that level of focus. And so you don't want to keep 150 recipes that require that much time. You want to keep a much smaller, just like anything else. If you don't have time to do it very much, you don't want a very big collection of options there.
Well,
okay.
And to reiterate, we're still talking about the keep, toss, pass.
Yeah, we're at the keep, toss, pass. Exactly.
We're talking about ways to winnow your 1,000 clipped recipes down to the 300 that you're going to want to go through more carefully.
That you just can't let go of, right? Oh my gosh, that's so true. Okay, so we talked about the skills, and we talked about whether you have the time to spend or not. And so if the recipe is beyond your skills, or it's beyond the time that you have to spend, then that's going to be a no. That's one of the ways to thin the herd of recipes. The next one is, if the recipe requires a tool that you don't have, then that's likely a no as well. You may want to buy that tool, but this is sort of like the ingredients. Like, do you really want to spend, $20, $100 on some fancy tool that you need to do this recipe that you're not sure that you like at the end? You really have to judge, if I have to do a specific tool here and I don't have that tool and I got to go spend money on it, it's just like the expensive ingredients that you're not going to use any other time. You may not want to go that far. So if it's a way to thin the recipes as well, and toss them out.
And a corollary to that is, if you've saved a lot of recipes that require something that you've decided not to use anymore, like you had a slow cooker but you don't use the slow cooker anymore, you could probably and you've decided, you've made up your mind, you don't enjoy that, then let the slow cooker recipes go.
Right.
Anita had a great comment. She said she talked about having done a big sort and used sheet protectors and pocket pages to put her recipes into a big binder, and she's only organized the ones that are tested and true or have significant sentimental value. But she says, when I find something I want to try, I toss it up on my cookbook shelf. When the pile falls on my head, I go through it. If I really want to try it, it goes in a skinny folder marked to test.
Oh my gosh. Well, so that's sort of a initial interest pile that becomes, then you go back and filter it again to the I really want to test it smaller pile. And if you have the time to do it that way and you want to create a pile and then filter the pile, but I think you might save yourself getting hit on the head with the recipes falling over if you notice the things that catch your interest and then don't make it past the test zone. There's probably lots of things that you read and go, oh, that sounds cool. But when you stop and look at it a little bit more closely, you realize, okay, that's never going to come to the top of the list. I'm not going to do it for whatever reason that is in your universe. Maybe you can try to let it capture your interest and then stop and don't actually clip it and put it on the pile. If you know it's never going to pass muster really, then use your experience with years of clipping and stop yourself from clipping something that you're going to have to go back and throw away the other, further down the line after the pile falls on your head, which I think is a hilarious trigger for sorting. It's like, that's hilarious. Okay, here's another algorithm. If it only sounds good to you, but it won't fly with others in your house, again, no. You're going to find certain things appealing, but that your kids won't eat this or your spouse won't eat this, then, good for you. And you probably don't need a big collection of things that you can only cook for yourself, because you're not going to have that many opportunities to cook just for yourself. Oh, of course, you're going to find those recipes that you don't remember why on earth you clipped it, or you don't know why on earth your mother clipped it. Those are pretty easy tosses. You had a moment of weakness, you clip something, and then you flip back through it as you do this fine sorting, and you go, what was I thinking? What was my mother thinking? Oh my God, you've got to be kidding. Those are easy decisions. Toss them out.
Janice, who's with us on Facebook, said, I remember as a kid, 9 years old, I used to collect recipes for my grandma in hand-sewn booklets. Sadly, they were all lost during the cleanup when my gran was moving to live with us. But if I were to organize crop out from magazines, I just get a notebook and stick them as soon as I find them. Now I collect recipes on my laptop in one text file.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's a way to keep the clutter down. So you want to recycle anything that doesn't hold your interest. I know that people read recipes for entertainment, and there's a difference between being entertained by the recipe and actually having that recipe hold your interest as something that you might want to try cooking. So notice the difference. I remember that one client had this cookbook that had all these recipes that were like super fancy, decorative, entertaining recipes that were supposed to look like the end result was very sculpted and pretty, and it was all these really elaborate recipes. And she's like, in my head, when I got this book, I thought, yeah, I'll make some of these. And then she was like, yeah, except not really. It was interesting to read as fun, but there was no way that she was actually going to cook any of these recipes. It was just way too much work for her. And so from that standpoint, it was solely entertainment and not actually a recipe that could be used. And so all people that cook have some recipes that are solely for entertainment, but you probably don't want those in your system. You probably want those somewhere else on a bookshelf and treat them like a book that you read instead of a source for recipes that you would actually cook.
Yeah, I think that's part of the motivation too for some people is reading recipes, especially if they're written by people who include a lot of narrative about their cooking and recipes, or the culture associated with their people. A lot of times there are a lot of cookbooks now where people talk about their family traditions, their cultural traditions, and that's fascinating to a cook. And reading those recipes is a really interesting way to understand other people's cultures and other people's lifestyles. So that's an important distinction to make. It's I read this recipe here with these 7 ingredients I would have to drive across town to an Indian market to buy. I can enjoy this recipe for what I learn from it without actually doing that exercise.
Pretending that you're going to cook it, right?
Yeah.
Like it's just like another book that you're reading for your own entertainment and edification. And separating those recipes and those books, those cookbooks like that, and getting them out of the kitchen and recognizing that this is just fun reading for me. This is not actually cooking source material.
I will try those things. Like, recently we haven't found a great carry out hot and sour soup. We're only doing carry out restaurants these days. So I got a little adventurous and had to buy several ingredients that I don't normally keep around, and read 3 or 4 different recipes for hot and sour soup and sort of consolidated them all into one approach of my own and tried it. So I'm not saying I'm not trying
You
to
would never
suggest
do it, right?
people,
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
or to suggest that anyone else shouldn't, just to be realistic about the recipes you keep.
Well, and what really has an entertainment value for that isn't about the cooking, it's about the reading of the cooking, which is a different thing. So hopefully these algorithms have helped you trigger some of your own algorithms. They're options for you that you can modify however you need them. But the idea is that as you go through all of these recipes, yours and any you inherited from your parents, your grandparents, your auntie, yeah, I know that you have a collection, you have multiple collections. If you're over 25, you probably have more than one collection in your house. So going through this process to keep and toss what doesn't need to stay, here we've given you some choices and hopefully spawn some extras. And so this is going to reduce your pile of recipes by a large portion. And then you're down to the recipes that you potentially want to try that pass muster, that are real live possibilities. And so now you need to sort those things that you've decided to keep. So you're going to sort according to the usual categories, and you can make your own list, breads, entrees, desserts, vegetables, however you think of it, side dishes and entrees. It can be the general categories that work for you, but you want to sort all those recipes that you kept into one of the categories. And so we're going to talk about one particular category for discussion purposes. Let's talk about dessert, because that's my favorite category. As you sort your desserts, you're going to sort those desserts, for instance, if you've sorted everything into the various big categories, and then you can go back and look at desserts. So you want to sort within a specific category. And if you sort your desserts into cakes and pies and cookies and mousse and whatever else, I bet you're going to figure out, because you love pumpkin pie, that you have 14 pumpkin pie recipes. So as you build these more detailed piles, you can filter out the 14 pumpkin pies and you can choose a few of them to keep. You don't actually need that many options to get a pie to happen. So it's sort of a step 2 of sorting. You make those categories and then you go into each of the categories and say, okay, of all these desserts, look how many times I clipped pumpkin pie. And why don't I thin that herd? Yes, I want a pumpkin pie recipe, clearly, because I keep clipping them. But maybe you can decide that you'll keep 3 of them out of the 14, and then another 11 of them can go in the recycle bin because you found the 3 best amongst the collection you've got. This will also shrink your collection some more.
And this also makes me think of another thing that probably could go in the keep toss pass. If there's an ingredient that you don't like to use anymore, so for example, a lot of older recipes call for corn syrup, like Caro. And nowadays, because that's such a high density source of sugar and
Sugar,
calories,
yeah.
it's disputed whether it's any worse than any other form of sugar. But maybe you've quit using Caro. Let's just say you've stopped using corn syrup. Well, don't keep any recipes that have corn syrup in the ingredients. Find something you like better, another
Well,
form.
and you can, I'm sure you probably already have a version that doesn't have Caro
Right.
syrup in it, right?
Right.
Like you
Yeah, exactly.
filter for the ones that have the ingredients that you want to use, is the point.
Tammy says, I'm a create as I go cook and use very few recipes online, but I have to look up each time.
That's okay, right? Like if that's a system that works for you, then you're looking them up, which is fine. And then you do your creative process and you get food at the other end. So I think, that's a mark of an experienced cook, that you can sort of get the suggestion of a recipe and then you wing it and do your own thing, right? So you can just make it happen after you've just sort of refreshed yourself about what's supposed to be in a recipe.
And Nancy said, when my mom passed on in 2006, she left behind 8 recipe boxes, chock-a-block full. I tried to start going through them several times, but could never stick with it. This year, fortunately, one of my nieces said she'd like to have them all, so I was able to pass along the whole box from the garage to her.
Oh my
Bless her.
gosh.
What a relief.
Oh my gosh, yes. That saves you a whole lot of trouble, right? Yay. Happy thank you to the niece for that one. That's awesome. Okay, so we've filtered via Keep Toss, and then you've sorted what you've kept, and you've sorted into categories, and you've filtered again at that level when you've gotten all the pieces together of the same kind of thing, and you're filtering again. Now you really do have a collection that is sorted of all of the recipes that you want to keep. And those are going to be things that you've already tried and you approve of, and then it's going to be the pile of things that you are going to try someday. Like they're in the funnel to potentially get tried out. So now you want to put those recipes in a system. So you either going to pick a paper version, like the recipe boxes we've been talking about, or you're going to pick a digital version. So I'm going to sort of make a list here. Some people like to put them in binders with sleeve protectors and dividers by section, and there's recipe binders that are pre-prepared, like you buy off the shelf with the dividers ready, or you can just take a binder and put sleeve protectors and slap in and label your own dividers, like whatever works for you there. There's the traditional little recipe box that has little index cards, and people write on those index cards their recipes. Some people use a recipe box. It's actually a flat box with the clipped recipes or the handwritten recipes laid out with dividers in amongst the box. All of those options are paper-centric versions, and you just want to pick the one that you feel like is the most comfortable for you. I think the idea of writing a recipe on a card by hand is some level of a barrier to entry. If you don't have the time to copy all of these recipes from your clipping onto a card, then you probably don't want to pick that as an option if you don't think you will ever actually execute the transfer. So when you're picking, pick the one that you feel like you can maintain and keep going over time as you beyond this particular sorting and organizing project. Then you're going to be adding more recipes in the future, and you want to be able to maintain the system that you pick. So pick one that you like. The online version of this, there's a digital version of it. If you don't want paper, if you want digital, then one of our watchers suggested creating a bookmark folder just for recipes. And so you can slap those into a folder online. You can scan them to import them into Dropbox or some other online storage. You can scan them to import them into an online recipe app or an online service of some kind. And one of our viewers suggested Paprika 3 as an app. I know there's a million others out there. And Ed, you wanted to talk about Google standards.
Yeah,
here.
Google sort of has. I'm not sure if they did this on their own or in collaboration with others. So my apologies if this was someone else's project that Google took over, as sometimes happens. But there's a sort of now an online standard for recipe format where amounts and ingredients and processes get properly tagged and get organized, which makes them easy to transfer from one site to another, one app to another. It makes it so tools for organizing your recipes online interact with shopping lists and interact with processes to order food for delivery or pickup and so on. And so that's kind of nice. I go sort of lower tech than that myself, which is if I've refined a recipe, if I've tested a recipe and made adjustments of my own. So if I like it, I'll just bookmark it and save it to come back to it. But if I make my own changes, then
Tweaks.
I just transcribe it into the Mac OS Notes app. It's not super high tech. It is not to the Google standard or anything like that. But the Mac OS Notes, which synchronizes between my laptop and my phone and my iPad, it includes checklists, so I can sort of include the ingredients as a checklist, and then I can and have the steps in there as well, and makes it easy to sort of check things off as I've collected them or prepared them for the recipe. So that's kind of nice.
And even that is an online thing, but it's an example of you're using existing tools that weren't designed for recipes. You're using it in a very low tech way, and it works just fine. So don't worry about, oh my gosh, I have to have the best recipe app ever, and I want the one that has all the bells and whistles, and I want to do it all in here. If you find that entertaining, then awesome, and go for it. But you can still have a digital version that is the equivalent of a binder with sleeve protectors and dividers, right? You can modify use your existing tools online to capture data in whatever way is easiest and most useful to you, basically.
Well, and truthfully, this is where I get on my soapbox for a minute. A lot of people have decided that they're going to make $1 million by putting their recipes online. And so I have found that a lot of food blogs and recipe sites drown you in advertising. And so that's sort of an argument for even if I find a recipe I like and want to use unchanged, I can save myself some hassle by transcribing it into notes, because then when I go in the kitchen and I'm reading it off my phone, all I see is the recipe. And Jaime actually, what he does is if he finds a recipe he wants to try, he screenshots the list of ingredients and he screenshots the list of instructions. And then he goes in the kitchen and works from his screenshots, so that
Which
you're not.
then filters out all the stupid ads.
It's well, and
I totally agree with you on that.
I understand, people wanting to try and, make money off of the content that they're sharing, but I also don't, it seems to be a real problem with recipe sites in particular, that on the phone, I'll be looking at the recipe and a pop-up video appears, and then a pop-up ad appears, and then another pop-up ad appears at the bottom. And I'm trying to just read this recipe that I'm in the middle of cooking, and I have to keep scrolling up and down and clicking to move things out of the way and disappear the advertising. And
so annoying. Oh my gosh.
Mary, it's not.
Yes.
It's fine to try to make some money off of advertising. We do it on our YouTube videos.
Right.
So I can't. I'd be a hypocrite to criticize that, but it seems sort of disrespectful to do it on a recipe where somebody's trying to use your recipe in the kitchen,
and they can't see all the recipe. Yeah. And we actually we turn off the advertisements in the middle of the videos, because I find it super annoying to be listening to somebody talk and then have it cut away to an ad. So we purposely don't run ads in the middle because it makes both of us irritated. So we totally get why you would have trouble with it in the recipe thing.
Yeah. A couple of comments while we're paused.
Okay.
Charity, who's with us on Facebook, says, growing up, I have fond memories of sitting with friends and family reading colorful magazines and books. Now my boys have been transitioning me to cooking off of my phone. So Charity's there with us, cooking off the phone in the kitchen.
Good job. You're learning.
Clover says 99 out of 100 cookbooks in the library should be filed as works of fiction.
There you go. There you go. See, an experienced cook. And I think that's probably true, that the more experienced you are cooking, the more you can look at the recipe and go, that's not going to work. That's not going to come together. That's not going to read. That's not going to deliver as advertised. I can tell just from looking at it. So good way to filter it there. If you don't think that it's a realistic recipe, then it's a good way to tell yourself you don't need to have it.
And two great suggestions from Ginger on Facebook. She said there's a project management spiral binder with 24 slash pockets. I use this for recipes. This binder is useful for temporary storage for annual projects, those papers that have no home and won't be kept for more than a year. And then
Cool.
Ginger also suggested look for the sites that offer a print recipe option. It formats it neatly. You can screenshot a one-sheet recipe. That is a terrific idea. The print option usually either automatically leaves out the ads or gives you an option to leave out the ads when you print it.
Yeah,
And you
so
can
it's
print
not
it.
so terrible.
You can either just take a screenshot of what that produces, or print a PDF and use that.
Yeah, and
But
it can still be 100. It can still become paper, or it can become 100% digital. And I think that's a much better thing to do.
yeah,
If you try to just like print the screens as you go inside when you're online, then you get a much more long, like the recipe that takes up a page becomes 8 pages because of the way that the website is formatted. So much better to go look for that print version that actually says, oh, you want to make a document out of it. Okay, we'll make a document. And it's much easier to follow that way.
yeah.
Okay, so you got the cookbooks now. We've been talking about cookbooks, but basically cookbooks need to be sorted just like all of your others. As she said, folk take the cookbooks that are actually fiction and go put them in the entertainment section of your bookshelf, and leave the cookbooks that you would actually cook out of in the kitchen. And I often find in a kitchen that has very limited storage space anyway, that there'll be a cabinet full or a really big shelf full of recipes, cookbooks. And it's fun to see the big, long 4 feet of cookbooks up there. But if you don't actually go into them and use them that way, then it's really kind of wasting some valuable storage in your kitchen. So I would filter the cookbooks for my go-to cookbooks, and every cook I've ever talked to is like, oh yeah, I can pull those 6 cookbooks down that I get into all the time. I return to the favorite recipes are in. It's my favorite, recipe writer, whatever. And so the subset of 100 books goes down to 6 for the ones that get used 75% of the time. And those can stay in the kitchen because you used them 75% of the time. And then the rest of them become part of a library somewhere else. They go out of the kitchen, and you get that valuable kitchen shelf space or cabinet space back for something else you need in the kitchen besides recipes. And if you suddenly decide it's Christmas and you need to go get this specialty Christmas cookbook out, then you go to your cookbook library in another room and pull out your cookbook that you need for the holiday. But it doesn't all have to stay in the kitchen. And I think filtering the recipes for what you use as a go-to and what is just fun and collecting and entertainment and sometime use, there you go. That's the thing. Okay, and then now that you have filtered the cookbooks in theory, then you want to find the perfect location for the recipe system. And I think everybody defaults to the kitchen because in theory you're going to use it in the kitchen, and that kind of makes sense. But maybe it makes more sense that you keep the recipe system near where you actually clip recipes. So if you're not sitting down in the kitchen to clip recipes, if you're doing that in the living room or the den while you're watching television, that's when you flip the magazines or you go through the websites or you print things off in your office, then maybe the recipe collection system needs to be near where you clip whatever clipping looks like, so that you can add them into the system when you do it. And then when it's time to cook, you can take it from its parking space and take it into the kitchen to work with it. You cook something where you're done, you go put the recipe system back where you clip recipes. Because I think that there's a disconnect between how often you add to the recipe book and how often you consult the recipe book. And so if you add to the recipe book more than you consult, then store it where you add, not where you use. Does that make sense? And if, again, there's going to be recipes that are your go-tos. So you may want to have a small subset of, I cook this recipe for Hamburger Helper according to grandma, and I cook this thing once a week because everybody in my family loves it. So if you have go-to recipes, that's not going to be all the recipes you kept. It's going to be this little small collection of 20 recipes that you cook all the time. Those can live in their own thing in the kitchen, and the rest of your recipe collection system can be where you collect, if that makes sense.
So your lovely roommate, who is one of my favorite cooks, says, when I find a recipe I like in a magazine or library book, I snap a pic with my phone. I've created a special recipe album in my phone camera. That's another terrific lower tech solution.
Exactly. There it is. And then she has it when she goes shopping. The recipe is right there. She can consult it to buy ingredients. And I think creative cooks, some of them plan long term, like you plan your week's worth of food, but some creative cooks are like, what do I feel like creative tonight? And so you don't worry about it until you're sort of on top of it. And if that's how you do it, then you have the recipe in the phone. And when you decide that tonight you feel like a cheese and chicken recipe, then you can go find one in the store and get what you need and you're ready to go. So I think taking a photo and stashing it in your album is a great idea. And then it's available to you all the time. So make sure that you have a system. Now we've done all this work to get you a system. So you need to use it and refine it as you find things about it that work or don't work, but you want to keep it up. So after all that fine sorting and corralling, it should be much easier to then add new things in, filter old things out, and make it happen, make it be the system that you use going forward so that you don't end up with another pile on the shelf falling over onto your head. I think that's a hilarious sorting trigger. And hopefully your system will prevent you from having head injuries as a result of your recipes. Oh, okay. That's my commentary on recipes today.
On the topic of the initial round of Keep Toss, Diane said, I now have an intolerance to some food, so I will toss those out now. And that's a great point. You know, if you or someone in your family has developed an intolerance or even an allergy, because some allergies come on in your 30s or 40s. And
Right, exactly.
so you may have collected recipes once upon a time that you wouldn't cook now because you don't use green onions anymore. You don't cook with.
You can't eat shrimp, or you're not a gluten person anymore.
Right.
Yeah, all that.
Bonnie said, I recently donated a stack of cookbooks. I only kept the ones that were from hometown organizations with tried and true recipes. The rest I donated. I can find a recipe for pretty much everything with a simple Google search. If I like it, then I save an electronic copy as a PDF. And let's see.
There you go.
Someone also chimed in and said, Okara chimed in and said that she uses notes for recipes as well. So that makes two of us at least. And
right?
It's easy to locate when I want it and also to share with others when they ask. That was one of the appeals of it to me. So one of the things I've been doing, one of my pandemic entertainments has been experimenting with the Instant Pot. We got an Instant Pot in March or so.
Yeah.
And so I've been experimenting with things to adapt to the Instant Pot, things that I used to spend all day making that I now have Instant Pot versions. And just like with a slow cooker, with a pressure cooker, you have to sometimes adapt the recipe. Like you can't you can't necessarily throw everything in there and put the lid on and hit go. Sometimes you have to pressure cook for a while and then add the things that are too fragile.
Oh, yeah.
For pressure cooking.
Okay.
Or things that you don't want cooked down to mush. And then there are things you can't put in at the same time. Like if you add too much acid to beans, dry beans, they will never get soft. So you can't like throw tomatoes and vinegar in with your beans and at the first stage. So you cook your beans with stock and then later on add tomatoes,
all that other stuff,
vinegar, citrus, the things that acidify the taste.
Right.
So anyway, sorry, that was kind of a tangent.
But the tangent was you adapt the recipes for the Instant Pot, which means that you keep the recipes for that and you let the ones that you're going to use cook some other way maybe filter out.
Oh yeah, and I know where I was going with that, which is I have this assemblage of Instant Pot recipes, and we gave an Instant Pot as a gift to a cook friend of ours recently for her birthday, and I sent her 3 or 4 of my favorites. Instant
Of
pot,
your adaptive recipes.
yeah, instant pot chili and instant pot pinto beans and some of those
Yeah.
things.
Awesome.
We need to move along. I'm going to come back to you for any final thoughts on recipes, but first I want to remind our viewers and listeners that we have a YouTube channel, in case you didn't know that, that has more than 150 videos on a wide variety of organizing
Wow.
topics.
After a year of 2020, adding videos
Right.
every week.
Visit cfhou.com/YouTube. While you're there, you can subscribe to the channel and then click on the bell icon next to the subscribe button if you'd like to get notifications when we post new content. I also want to remind people that you can hire Gayle. It's a new year. You
It's a
might
new
be
year.
kicking off new projects. And so if you're in the Houston area, you can visit clutterfairyhouston.com and book an appointment. You can also, even if you're not in the Houston area, work with Gayle virtually. And so visit cfhou.com/virtual to find out more about how that works.
I love getting to meet you guys that way. It's so much fun for me. So please come and play with me.
I see that you've been doing a lot of that, and that's really terrific. I think it's great that you can help people all over the world. As long as anybody that you can agree on a time that you're both awake, pretty much.
Right, exactly. There's that.
Okay. Do you have any final thoughts on recipes?
I think the final thought about recipes is that recipes are always a fine sorting project. They're like photographs. You have a million pieces. You have to look at each piece to make a decision, and it's going to take you a while. So you may want to not try to do it all in one day. You might want to do it over a couple of weekends or something, and give yourself the ability to thin the herd and actually pay attention to what you've captured, because I know that that big pile of recipes is not getting used, and you're not actually finding things that you're saving when you want them because of that big bundle. So spend the time to actually get through the fine sorting process and create the recipe capture system that you've always had in your mind and thought you were going to do someday. Now's the time to try to do it and see if you can actually get a functional, usable, researchable collection that you can look things up in, that you can add things to, and start trying some of the recipes that you've been promising yourself you're going to cook. And we take food deliveries by mail. Anybody wants to ship us their experiments, we're happy to try them.
Okay,
that's my final thought.
one more off-topic question. Kathleen asked, "What does your shirt say?" And so,
if you can read this, what does it say? Oh, you're too close to me.
Oh, sorry, I'm crinkled.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you can read this, you're too close to me.
Yeah. It's my pandemic. It's my pandemic T-shirt.
But it would have been your curmudgeon-y T-shirt and not in the pandemic.
It's
true.
It's true. I really didn't like contact with other people that much before the pandemic. But okay.
Exactly.
Now, if you've stuck with us this far, it's time for this week's homework assignment.
Ooh.
And in this new weekly segment, we're going to shine a bright light on one specific clutter problem area. We recognize that this weekly assignment is not going to apply to everyone every week, but I think that, every week we're going to cover an area that's a problem for some specific subset of our viewers. We're going to ask questions designed to identify how and why these areas trip people up. And then we'll offer action items to help you get those trouble spots under control. And so, Gayle.
So this was suggested in some of our conversations, and the idea is that everything needs to have a place. So we want a place for everything, and your homework assignment is to pick an item that you frequently lose track of. I can't find my wallet, I can't find my keys, I can't find my phone or purse, I can't find the recipe for my favorite hamburger helper. Whatever that thing is, think about something that you lose all the time or you lose track of every day, and you want to be able to give it a new resting place. It needs to have a new home. So the anecdote that from Kara in Zoom last month was that she remembered that a flight attendant announced when they were getting on the plane, and she said, here's a nice reminder to put your driver's license back where you expect to find it the next time you look for it. And she said that she had never forgotten that. And I thought, this is a great example of there's something in your life that you want to keep up with and you always lose it. So pick that thing, go pick a place for it to go, and practice and concentrate on using that place every day and see if you can add that habit to your life. And that shift will give you some productivity. It can reduce your stress. If you can always get your keys when you're ready to go out the door without having to spend 50 minutes looking or having a panic attack about, oh my God, where's the phone? Those things are distracting and disruptive, and they get in the way of you going about your productive day. And so pick an item, pick its place, and practice using that place and getting used to using it. The reason we say one thing is because you only want to make one habit change here. That's the homework assignment. And when you come back next week, maybe you can tell us how it went. Were you able to adapt? Were you able to add the habit? Were you able to find a place for it? And if you tried and failed a place, then tell us about it also so that we can troubleshoot and give you some alternative options. We can help you modify to get to something that works for you. Can't wait to hear what y'all pick.
Okay. And now here's the contest we talked about.
Oh, right.
So the contest is, we think that homework assignment is a little bit prosaic as a name.
It's way too dull and way not Clutter Fairy enough.
This segment, and we haven't come up with one we like better yet. So we wanted to open this up. We wanted to crowdsource a name for this segment of the webcast and podcast. And so please, let's see, where are we going to put that? I guess you can comment on the YouTube video or the Facebook.
The Facebook, right? Or you can send us an email.
Or yeah, just send an email to, do we have this, hold up the email one, which is,
that's not it. Hold on.
Okay.
I got the website.
Okay. Do we not have a send us an email
no.
sign? We don't? No. I thought we had a send us an email sign. So sorry. Okay. Yeah, well, you can, at clutterfairyhouston.com, we have a contact us form, and you could send it to us that way.
Yeah.
So we want your suggestions for a name for this segment, and the winner, as selected by our panel of experts, which will be Gayle and Ed and probably a few friends.
Whoever else we rope into it.
The winning choice, the person who suggests the winning entry will receive a 1-hour virtual organizing session with Gayle as a prize.
Yay.
So come up with those ideas and send them to us.
Right? We want you guys to help us make this fun. Okay.
Okay, we are really running out of time now. I want to remind everybody that we'll meet next week, Tuesday, January 12th, 2021. At noon U.S. Central Time, live in Zoom and streaming on Facebook. I will have turned a year older.
Ooh, and it's almost birthday time.
It is. If you're watching this on YouTube, we'd love for you to join us live. To get I need to spotlight you. I didn't ever spotlight you today because
that's all right. You had a bunch to talk about.
But you're holding up signs, and so you need to be spotlighted now. And so we'd love for you to join us live to get notifications about upcoming events. We invite you to join the meetup group by visiting cfhou.com/meetup. You can also follow us on Facebook by going to cfhou.com/Facebook, or subscribe to our mailing list by visiting cfhou.com/subscribe.
There you go.
We love to hear from you. So keep those questions and topic suggestions coming in the YouTube comments on Facebook or anywhere else that you find us. And you can reach us through our website at clutterfairyhouston.com.
And there was a request for an email address, and so I think we can say it on here. You can send email to clutterfairyhouston@gmail.com, and that will get to us as well.
You could also, actually, you know what? People could use TCFW, TFCW, TCFW, I was right the first time, the Clutter Fairy Weekly at clutterfairyhouston.com.
It works, okay.
Will reach both of us, actually, so that's kind of a good one. I'm going to put that in the TCFW at clutterfairyhouston.com.
In the notes somewhere?
I'm putting that in the chat, and I'll also include that in the show notes.
Okay.
I might even, if I get my act together fast enough, I can even put a special link on the site where you can send us your suggestions for the segment name, the contest.
All right.
In case people couldn't tell, Gayle and I did not have our act quite as together this week as usual. We have a million great ideas churning for future topics, and we promise that we will put our heads together and put together a calendar soon, and we'll see you next week.
All right. Happy holidays, and well, happy new year to everybody. So glad that you came to visit us today, and we'll see you on the flip side.
Bye-bye.
Bye.